The burning bush. God calls Moses. In the vast, sunlit wilderness of Midian, where the desert sands stretched endlessly beneath an infinite sky, a lone shepherd guided his flock across the ancient landscape. His name was Moses, and for 40 peaceful years, he had lived far from the grandeur and cruelty of Egypt, tending the sheep of his father-in-law, Jethro, the priest of Midian. Moses had once walked the marble halls of Pharaoh's palace, raised as a prince of Egypt. But those days were long behind him now. He had fled Egypt as a young man after defending a Hebrew slave, and the desert had become his refuge, his teacher, his home. Here, among the rocks and sparse vegetation, Moses had found a simpler life, a life of quiet rhythms and gentle solitude. On this particular day, the sun rose slowly over the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and amber. Moses led his flock westward, beyond the familiar grazing grounds, toward the mountain called Horeb, the mountain of God. The sheep moved peacefully, their bells chiming softly in the morning stillness as they searched for the tender shoots of grass that grew between the stones. The air was warm and dry, carrying the faint scent of desert herbs. Moses walked steadily, his staff in hand, his thoughts drifting like clouds across the clear sky. He had walked this wilderness countless times, knew its hidden springs and sheltered valleys, its dangers and its mercies. Then, in the corner of his vision, something unusual caught his attention. Among the thorny bushes and weathered rocks, a single bush burned with brilliant flames. The fire danced and flickered, crackling with vibrant energy, its light almost too bright to behold in the desert sun. But as Moses paused and watched more carefully, he realized something impossible was happening. The flames consumed nothing. The bush continued to burn, its branches wrapped in fire, yet the leaves remained green and alive. The twigs did not blacken or crumble to ash. The fire burned on, defying everything Moses knew about the natural world. Wonder filled his heart. I must turn aside and see this strange sight, Moses thought, leaving his flock to graze as he walked toward the burning bush. Why does the bush not burn up? What could cause such a thing? Step by step, he drew closer to the flames, his eyes fixed on the miraculous sight. The fire seemed to pulse with a living presence, both beautiful and mysterious. Then, from the very heart of the flames, a voice spoke his name, clear, gentle, yet filled with unmistakable authority. Moses! Moses! Moses stopped immediately, his breath catching in his throat. Here I am, he answered, his voice barely above a whisper. Do not come any closer, the voice commanded with tender firmness. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. With trembling hands, Moses bent down and removed his sandals, feeling the warm desert earth beneath his bare feet. A deep reverence washed over him, and he covered his face with his hands, suddenly afraid to look directly at the burning bush, knowing somehow that he stood in the presence of the divine. The voice spoke again, and now it carried the weight of eternity, of promises made to generations past. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Moses remained still, listening with his whole being. God continued, and his words were filled with compassion. I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. Moses' heart stirred at these words. He thought of his people, the Hebrews, laboring under the brutal whips of Egyptian taskmasters, building cities and monuments with their tears and blood. Could it be that their long suffering would finally end? But then God spoke words that changed everything. So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people the Israelites out of Egypt." Moses's mind reeled. Him? A shepherd? A fugitive? An exile who had fled Egypt in disgrace 40 years ago? "Who am I," Moses protested, his voice filled with doubt, "that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" God's response was simple but profound. "I will be with you. And this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain." Still uncertain, Moses asked, "Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' Then what shall I tell them?" And there, from the flames that burned but did not consume, God revealed his eternal name, "I am who I am." "This is what you are to say to the Israelites, 'I am has sent me to you.'" The fire continued to dance in the desert air, brilliant and holy, as Moses stood barefoot on sacred ground. The shepherd had received his calling. The exile would return home. The deliverer had been chosen. Everything had changed beside the burning bush, and nothing would ever be the same again.